Hi, welcome to our day one session of the AppDev Summit, Release with Confidence. Today we are diving into a critical phase of delivering software that's not just built right, but it's also focused on automation, testing, continuous integration, deployment practices, and anything that has to do with releasing a smooth, secure, and stable software and development environment. My name is Paul Nashawaty, and I am here to talk to you about the app dev relationships and what's happening within the space. I cover the app dev practice here at TheCUBE Research, and I'm joined by industry expert Rob Strechay to share the insights and strategies to help your teams accelerate delivery while minimizing risk and empowering you to release with confidence over time. You know, Rob, it's always great to have you on. Always great to have conversations about, what we're talking about here. We've been around the block a few times and done this a few times, but I mean, I think it's awesome to be part of the App Dev Summit, and especially when it comes to what we're talking about here. So, why don't you introduce yourself to the crowd?
Yeah, well, thanks for welcoming me in and letting me be part of the summit here. It's a lot of fun because I think, again, like you said, we've both been around this block several times, depending on, where we've been, either on the vendor side, the end user side, and I think really a lot of the communication that we've had with a lot of the end users and seeing where they're at from these stages, especially in day zero, is really huge. So I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. And, we were just on with Savannah earlier today, talking about day zero. Here we're talking about day one. And as we kick off today's session, Release with Confidence, day one is really focused on how we're exploring modern development teams can streamline their release pipelines, really without sacrificing that quality or security. So in this session, Rob, I really want to talk about the things that really impact that, the SDLC, right? And when we look at the overall summit, we had day zero, day one, day two, and DevSecOps, and anything that touches a CI/CD pipeline and anything across the SDLC. But when we talk about day one in particular, there's specific things like automation, testing, continuous integration. Those things are in place to enable faster, more reliable software delivery. Would you agree?
I would totally agree, and I think I misspoke about day zero earlier, but I mean, day one is, when the rubber meets the road, right? And I think when you start to look at how teams instrument, in day zero, get to day one, see how things are deployed, and, making sure that it doesn't go bump in the night is a big piece of that as well.
No, absolutely. And then when we start talking about day the different life cycles, and when we're looking at different parts of the delivery, right? Let's talk a little bit about accelerating delivery pipelines. What are you hearing from vendors, from organizations, from the community? I know you have a lot of discussions with end users as well as vendors. What are you hearing with regards to accelerating delivery pipelines?
Yeah, I think again, it's everybody's looking to be able to lean in and go faster, right? But with confidence and trust, especially when you get into things like AI. I don't think any combination of different software as people build out agentic systems that are more than just chatbots. And I think a lot of them are looking for different ways and strategies to really lean in and accelerate their time to market and time to value with these applications, and how to be able to do that in an ongoing state. And I know similarly, you've been talking to a lot of customers and a lot of end users around, how they're really accelerating those delivery pipelines while trying to, minimize or maximize quality and minimize really deployment risks. What have you been seeing? I know you've been looking at the numbers as well.
Oh, absolutely. And, thanks for kind of teeing that up, because I really like the fact that I was able to do as I mentioned on a previous couple of sessions here, and if you haven't seen it, you should go back and look at them. But we have a number of new, fresh data points that are coming out of the field, right? And as part of this summit, lots of new research from the CUBE research around day zero, day one, day two, and DevSecOps. But let me address your comment in particular, Rob. When we're looking at accelerating delivery pipelines and ensuring quality and minimizing deployment risks, what we're finding is in our research, we're seeing it aligns nicely to the DORA metrics that we're seeing, where elite performers are deploying 973 times more frequently and have 6,570 times faster lead times than lower performers, right? And that's kind of about the acceleration, but we're also seeing how companies are adopting CI/CD pipelines. They're reporting 60 to 80% reduction in development time, which is faster feedback loops and improving product quality, and that's a big part of it as well. When you try to release, we found in our study that over 800 and some almost 850 respondents in a global study, we found that the organizations are looking to release code on an hourly basis. 24% of respondents indicated that they want to release code on an hourly basis, yet only 8% are able to do so. So part of the ways that these organizations are looking at ways to overcome this is they're adopting things like value stream management. And we're seeing in the research, by adopting value stream management, 15 to 20% increase in delivery efficiency across the software teams occurs. So there's a number of areas here, Rob, that I think is tying into the overall development process.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And when you start to think about these organizations that do deploy on an hourly basis, I mean, again, they have a lot of process behind the scene that enables them to go fast with little friction and give some independence to the different dev teams as well. But again, I think, when everybody talks about shift left or shift right and meet in the middle kinds of things, even beyond security, to me, it's, people want to do the right things and don't want to put out, for lack of a better word, crappy code, and want quality code to go out, because if it's not quality code, they're going to be revisiting it. And I know you and I have seen it before, where people were spending 30% of their time on bug fixes, 30% of their time on feature enhancements, and 30% of their time is only on innovation. And when we start to see things like that, that comes from things like having really good governance and policy automation, and really focusing in on how they can put as much of that in code and enable guardrails and guidelines to those devs. So how are you seeing, or how have you seen in the data, that organizations are really focused on implementing that governance and policy automation? Because they want to ensure compliance and security, but they don't want to slow people down. And I know that's a really tough lift.
Yeah, absolutely, Robin. What's really great about this is the session that Savannah and I covered off on day zero. We're talking about building code, and we're talking about low code, no code solutions, governance, control, and regulations, and compliance all kind of fit into this as well. But when we're talking about day one in particular, we're seeing that governance and policy automation is really becoming a point where organizations are looking at driving results. Right, 72% of CIOs basically state that lack of policy automation creates friction between the development speed and compliance needs. This is a problem because, as we said, unfortunately, your stat is spot on, which is a third of the time for developers are spent in writing code and innovating, where 2/3 of their time are spent in doing maintenance and things that they don't probably want to do. So honestly, but what we're seeing is, if with this low code, no code delivery of moving code and into like the citizen developer, you have to have automation and you have to have policy as code frameworks in order to reduce compliance violations. What we're seeing is organizations that use policy as code are reducing compliance violations by upwards of 70%. We're also seeing 63% of enterprise leaders are investing in platforms that enable governance to help that development workflow rather than bolting it on later. And the reason they're doing this is because they're empowering the citizen developer to do more of their own enablement of developing those codes and releasing their codes. They can have the professional developer focus on the things that they really want to focus on, like the innovation piece. And maybe, Rob, we'll see a shift. I know it's been years since I've seen this shift, but maybe we'll see a shift of that 1/3 of innovation moving up to 2/3 for that professional developer as we move forward.
That would be wonderful, to put it mildly. I think, again, when you start to look at how people are really focused on making things better. And I think, again, no organization, I was talking to this, the VP and CTO of a large bank at one of the shows we were at, and his exact thing was, hey, I want people to see the innovation we're doing, not be thinking of the bank as a monolithic entity that is go slow. We're doing everything cloud native. We're doing all of this. We're doing infrastructure as code. But yet we have regulations. I mean, again, having been on the financial side of things when I was, an IT end user, and the SEC sends you something in the mail, you pay attention to that. I mean, it's funny how that gets your attention. And same thing with bank regulators, stress testing and things of that nature, where they all have to go through. But I think a lot of that has to do with, a focus on quality and automation, which really can help those cycles, because I think, the fear of not having those pieces in place, infrastructure as code, really then hurts on the back end when you get to that quality and automation. How are you seeing, the organizations go about integrating quality and test automation into the development processes? Because everybody's looking to improve that reliability and accelerate release cycles. But again, it's putting the policies and procedures with the tools. And how are you seeing that role?
Yeah, no, Rob, this is great. I mean, this is a great question. I'm really happy you kind of asked in this from this perspective. As you know, I've been doing this kind of the focus in the app dev space for quite some time, and I run trending data, right? And when I have some trending research data, so in 2022, I ran a study that focused around the question of testing and the continuous integration testing, right? And I found shockingly only 29% of organizations in 2022 were doing continuous integration testing as part of the CI/CD pipeline. That to me was bad, and part of the challenge here, as we kind of understood this and unpacked this, is we understood that the business KPI was push code out the door fast. We already talked about getting that release out the door fast. Only 8% of organizations are able to do so. But the DevOps teams, their KPIs were to push the big green button, right? Push the code out the door. What we found in 2024, we found that the test in the CI/CD pipeline, that trending data, that number jumped from 29% in 2022 to 66% in 2024. That's a big jump, and the part of it is because when I've had these conversations with organizations and what they're doing, and a lot of the conversation is around like, why was this such a big jump? Well, historically, what the discussion, the argument was, well, we do sprint releases every 2 weeks. If we find a bug, we'll just push it out the door and fix it. And as we do it every 2 weeks, the problem with that is you're using your end users as the kind of the guinea pigs of what's happening. That's a really risky game, especially when you have if something doesn't work and you move on to the next application, because that's a really risky game. So organizations found that to be an issue. I believe they look at that and they said, okay, we need to fix this. So they moved that up to that's where that 66% comes in. But we're also seeing this across the industry, right? We're seeing automated testing. It correlates to 90% reduction in escape defects that happen in production environments, right? We're also seeing 81% of organizations that implementing shift left saw measurable improvements in software quality, team, and velocity. Now, keep in mind, shift and left doesn't mean everything goes left, because the developers can't just do everything. They're not sitting there with the catcher's mitt going on board. They're actually, and they don't want to work a 12 to 16 hour workday. So you have to kind of balance this with automation and the right tools. But I do think the next stat here in our research, we find that the AI-assisted testing is being adopted by over 40% of enterprises, improving coverage that reduces the QA cycle. And I think that is the trend that we're seeing as we kind of go through this research. So lots going on there, Rob. I think that there's a lot happening with regards to testing and automation phases. And as part of day one, you absolutely have to be, have that in alignment for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with the AI stat anymore. I've been talking to a lot of CTOs that I know, and this is one of the places that they could never get really great coverage end to end, and AI has definitely allowed them to come in and step into building better tooling, better plans, better test automation, actual data, better test data, because you need dummy data to go against these testing and API endpoints. And depending on how you're building these applications, you want them to be compartmentalized. So to your point, you can come in and really hit the different compartments independently. So you don't have to do a full, hey, we're going to do a massive test of all the code all together all the time once a day or something like that. To your point about being hourly, you want to be able to get in and test the components in a way that really is realistic, based on real world outcomes, so that here's how we go. And I mean, AI is really good at that. AI is really good at taking data and saying, hey, what are some of the things that look like it, or maybe what are some of the things that may go and break this API? That type of stuff, and bringing that quality and using automation is a big piece of what has been going into that. I think if any part of the SDLC has really changed, to your point about, hey, we'll catch this in the next sprint kind of thing, is the SDLC on the quality side, I think, can really improve quickly, especially with security. Like you said, there's shift left. I kind of call it meet in the middle, because you're bringing the tooling. There's got to be shared responsibility in operations. And shift left, like you said, it sounds like you're throwing it over the wall to people, and that definitely does annoy the dev professionals who also are trying not to do things insecurely to begin with. So again, I think this whole shift left kind of gets blown out of proportion. But I think one of the other things, probably kind of one of the I would say, funny enough, like some of the Fast and the Furious movies, like, speed kills, right? And, but sometimes you can go fast if you're within compliance and you're within the guardrails and you understand what you're doing and you're prepared for that. What are you seeing from an organizational perspective that is allowing organizations to really balance the rapid software delivery with meeting those regulatory and internal compliance requirements? Because GRC is like, I mean, I was at a conference last week and GRC was top of mind for everybody that was building out these agentic applications, and their normal applications, funny enough, as well.
Yeah, this is a big part of the CI/CD pipeline. I mean, when you look at breaches, for example, we find that in research, we find that 76% of breaches are caused by misconfigurations or unchecked code changes, often stemming from rapid ungovernance releases, right? One thing that was kind of brought to my attention when I was kind of getting into the world of being an analyst, one of the things that talked a little bit when we think about delivery in relation to, security, sometimes you have to slow down to go faster. Right. And that to me is interesting, because I think that, we want to get things out the door faster. We want to push things out. But what we also find is if you push out the wrong thing, your reputation, your security breach, your privacy of your data, and your data is your lifeline. So if you push code out the door that's not effective or is insecure, it's a problem. We also find that organizations that are integrated security early in their pipeline reduce incident remediation costs by upwards of 50%. That's a big piece. And we're going to touch more about the DevSecOps piece as it relates to the CI/CD pipeline a little bit later in the summit here. But basically, what we're also seeing that DevSecOps adoption is expected to grow with a CAGR of 31% as teams align to velocity with audit-ready solutions that allow them to kind of get to the market. So it's really a lot happening here, and I think that that's a nice Rob. That's a nice kind of way to segue to like the next session here. But I think that as we wrap up the AppDev Done Right Summit session here that we're talking about for day one, we want to make sure the audience here, really understands there's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack. And, I really appreciate you being on, because this is awesome. And your perspective and experience in the market really kind of delivers that, understanding of where the market's going. And of course, anybody watching, both Rob and I are more than happy to continue the conversation. So this is as you can tell, we're not afraid to talk. So, but with that said, remember that embracing intelligent infrastructure solutions is essential to powering faster, more reliable software delivery. So stay agile, keep innovating, and continue to build the applications done right. Thank you for attending this session, and we'll talk to you soon.